right, and we're back.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to another Reacts with Noshad and Sunil.
Yes, sir.
So obviously, Noshad, a lot's been going on in society. It seems like back to back with COVID, and then now with the untimely or unfortunate death of George Floyd, and the protests, and just a lot has been going on. I think a lot of conversations have come to the forefront.
The silver lining, as tragic
Yeah,
as it was, the ripple effect of change is on the
sure.
horizon.
And I think a lot of people are doing some deep thought, introspective thought, and thinking about different things, not just race, but just overall. Get out and vote has been I guess, theme. And me personally, in doing a lot more research, I think um, some like pervading and talking to friends and family and especially with the national election happening in November, looking into what options we have, and then the local government, all this kind of thing. I think that there's just like this prevailing theme that when it comes to actually voting for a particular candidate, nobody's ever really happy. And I think that, there's this big theme of like just being frustrated with the system, being frustrated with the process. And I thought it would be a great time or a great topic to kind of just react to, maybe all of this frustration with our government overall, and just maybe come up with some solutions that we think might make it a more functional and a more more, I guess, maybe move it into 2020, and kind of think about where we would like to see change that we think would push the country in a positive way, from a system perspective.
You're right on. I mean, the current state is very much in the moment. In the moment, everyone is focused on the immediate, uh, you know, issues at hand. But having the foresight to see where this is going to go and how we can, uh, you know, put our attention into the right places to actually get good results as opposed to settling, which that's if you're referring to a theme. Well, I think that's generally the theme that I'm feeling.
Sure.
But yeah, man, I'm definitely looking forward to this one. So if you want to take the lead, by all
Yeah,
means.
so I mean, I think that one of the biggest things, obviously, in society today is through media, kind of deciphering what are some of the actual problems. Obviously, race is a big issue right now, with police brutality and just Black Lives Matter, obviously, which is a huge movement that needs to be paid attention to. But I really see the biggest issue, because it is a race issue, but I also think a huge problem that's kind of being mis or maybe not talked about as much as the class issue, right? So as far as there being a big discrepancy between um, the corporate elites and the corporations and things of that nature, and then just like the common person, right? And I think that actually is a prevailing theme in government as well, because even if we feel like we vote for somebody, whether it be a senator, a mayor, a congressperson, president, I think there's always this feeling, regardless of who it is, that not once they're in office or even going up to office, no longer are they worried about us. There always seems to be a huge corporate bailout. There always seems to be something where and it's not to a specific party. It's not to a specific politician. It's everybody. Where it seems like the I guess the priorities of the rich, the priorities of the corporation, the priorities of the banks seem to always be ahead of the common person, or you and I, or anybody that's really voting. And I
Hmm.
think one of those issues is just how much money is in behind. Like you see these politicians that are politicians for decades, and they go from very little money when they initially started in politics, and then by the time they leave politics and retire, they're millionaires and have multiple homes and
Right.
all this kind of thing. So really, I think that's a big problem. I don't know if you've thought about that, but one of the solutions that I have is I think that I don't think that being a politician should be a profession. I don't think there should be a term of career politician. I think that one of the benefits of a president is if you don't like that president, every 4 and maximum 8 years, that's how long they're going to be president, and then you're going to get somebody new in. I think that there needs to be that same type of mentality towards congressmen, towards senators, towards all positions where there's term limits. And why maybe 1 2 terms, maybe even 3 or 4 terms, whatever, that number I haven't really thought about too much. But the reason why I think that's important is because it limits the amount of pressure that corporations can put on a certain politician, give money behind, and get their stakes into somebody, which gives us as people a chance to constantly see fresh blood. That obviously gives a more of a chance for us to actually be represented versus somebody who's been in office for 30 some odd years that is line their pockets with big bank money, big corporation
Special
money,
interest,
and
yeah.
special interests that just we can't compete with financially.
No, I agree that the stagnant, still water effect that happens with a lot of career politicians, the ones who get comfortable, they get elected, and the leverage that comes with it just keeps them. That's absolutely an issue. And I guess I would be for an maybe a 10-year limit, or because I feel like a decade is enough time for I'm just trying to think if I was a congressperson, a senator, whatever it is, uh, in terms of fulfillment, I'm trying to think of, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, 10 years serving, a district, and especially if I'm not able to have, I mean, if I've created positive change and, enacted or passed legislation that has served the people well, I would feel fulfillment there. If I didn't do enough in 10 years and feel like I've let the people down over this long, unfortunately, you can't cling on to a job that you're not succeeding at for at least a decade. Whatever the profession is, like
Right.
if I was working in my field, I think 7 years I usually use as my turnaround for, okay, if I've been at a position for 7 years, then I should have mastered or peaked, or if I haven't caught on yet, then it's time to switch it up. And if I have mastered it, then there's a boredom that comes with it. There's a, okay, I'd like to move on to some other aspects. So, just from that personal perspective, I think it makes sense. And as far as for the people, why not? I mean, and the seeing youth in government is, I think, always a good sign. Obviously, there's mistakes that come with it. Lack of
Right.
experience. I think AOC is the best example. She's very outspoken. She's young. She's energetic. But as far as I'm concerned, the attention from her constituents and from the rest of the country. I mean, the more eyes that are on the issues, the better. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm all in favor of that type of change.
And I think the biggest reason is you know the corporations can't kind of buy these politicians because there's always going to be a new one coming up, right? And so I think the reason why I think it's so important is because there's this, you look at our state in California, Dianne Feinstein has been senator like my whole life. Like I don't even, as long as I can remember, she's been senator for California. Now, I personally haven't been that involved in politics till maybe recently, as far as like really doing research and stuff like that. But it's hard to believe that it's easier to constantly get a message out if you have a lot more money, and if a corporation funds your whole campaign, or special interest, which is how kind of these things are done. Lobbyists pay a certain amount of money to be able to get you to have or get a certain amount of votes and get things their way. Like it makes it harder for corporations to pick a person and then just ride with them for a long time. It makes, and then the second thing that I think is really important is a lot of these politicians enact these laws that they never have to live by because they're constantly in politics and they tend to be above the law, and kind of just that whole bubble that they live in DC.
What's the
Whereas,
situation? I'm trying to think. Outside of COVID shutdown, which obviously a lot of politicians broke quarantine, or not quarantine, but stay at home. But I'm trying to think of a recent.
well, I'm seeing more like just in power vacuums, because you see, like, with Hillary Clinton and the emails, if she wasn't a politician, it would be handled a lot different. Everything from, Bill Clinton
I guess
and
corruption aspect of it. That's
yeah,
kind of a
corruption is
catch-all.
what I
Okay,
mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. I mean, maybe if I didn't
I mean, yeah, that's
speak to that,
being
that's
a
what I
corrupt
mean.
politician is absolutely breaking the law. So, no, I thought of
Right.
like they literally would pass some legislation and then go do the opposite.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, sometimes they do, right? As far as like, um,
some hunting laws in Colorado or something.
yeah, or getting like stuff that would be maybe not like, like, getting money from
Yeah,
foreign entities and stuff
sure.
like. So
Yeah, yeah.
like, there's a lot of things that kind of go under that they don't get as to the light as if it was just you or me, right?
Sure.
Or
Yeah, yeah.
wouldn't get the same benefit of that as you or me, because they're backed by, so much. They have so much power, I guess. So that's one of the big things that I think can change immediately. That would force there to be a fresher voice, force and at least give us as the common person a chance to actually, have ourselves represented versus, corporations represented.
No, that's. I think I don't have any quells about that one. But on the topic of representation, that was my first starting point as well. I would put immediate emphasis, and I don't think the result would be immediate, but um, in terms of equal representation for the voting public, as it stands right now, uh, we are, at least for the general election, we are under the function of an electoral college, right?
Right.
I never really understood what the specifics was, so I dug in. So it all starts with the census, which I mean, most people, they yawn at the idea of a census, but now it's so critical. The census counts towards apportionment of House of Representative seats. So right now we have a maximum of 435 seats available, and the Electoral College essentially grabs those 435 seats and mirrors them, and basically there's one vote per seat, and then you couple in the 55 seats in Congress, and so per state you have any X amount of House of Representatives seats, and then two additional Senate seats.
Senate seats. Yep.
And so the reason why that's obviously, I mean, if anyone followed the last election and the election with George Bush
Bush
against
first
Al
one and
Gore,
Kerry. Or
was it
Gore,
Al
right?
Gore?
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. The issue of the electoral votes. Uh,
They're winning
the
the
popular vote was individually higher than the electoral vote, but the president was chosen based on electoral vote.
right.
And depending on what side of party you're on, obviously which party you're on, it's you're going to be in favor or opposed. But um, the most alarming aspect of it, and just from my cursory level reading, was small states like the biggest culprit is Wyoming. Uh, they have a population of 580,000 people, and they only have 3 seats. But they have each individual person in Wyoming has 4 times the voting power of an individual person in California with a population of 40 million practically. I think at this point we're probably more if you have undocumented. And we have 55 seats, but those seats are watered down. So what happens is the one individual Wyoming seat, 193,000 people vote for that one seat. Whereas in California, 725,000 people are voting on just the one seat. And it's, at that point, the seats are not weighted equally. So to think that the majority of any state holds weight against another state, it's not a fair compare. And there needs to be, I mean, obviously I would like to switch over to popular vote, but there's probably not going to be that approved or
Drastic of
passed
a
at this
switch.
point. Um,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I think that's a big thing that people talk. I guess to counter that, I guess to take devil's advocate on the other side of it, it's only happened three times in the history of presidential elections. So only
Twice
three times
recently,
where
and I think three times
one time, no,
going to
one
the,
time
was it one time in the
previous,
1800s? Yeah, yeah.
and then these other two times. And obviously, so it's happened three times over the history of elections, which we've had at least 45 and almost double that with most presidents winning at least two,
Back in
and
the
then
day,
FDR
however
obviously a
many
four,
longer,
right?
yeah.
But to highlight your point, in the last five elections, it's happened twice, right? Once with Bush, once with Trump. And so that's one point. So it doesn't happen super often. Second, when you look at this last election with Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote by 3 million, she actually won the popular vote here in California by 4 million, right? So the reason why that the Electoral College was initially there was because of making sure that there aren't certain states that just end up um, having more power than a small state. So for example, using that, if there was just a popular vote in Wyoming versus California, Wyoming having, you said 500,000 people.
580, yeah.
Yeah, so let's say 500,000 people, California having
40
40
million.
million people. It could be easy to see maybe a candidate would spend more time just focusing on California and maybe disregarding, Wyoming, which is kind of what is there as far as protection for, right? And we kind of seen it in the primary with Bloomberg in the Democratic primary. He had this strategy where the initial few primaries he didn't even really like run in those. Wasn't even on the ballot. He didn't invest any money in ads or anything like that because his idea was just to come in for the Super Tuesday, where majority of the votes there, majority of the delegates were there, and just really try to win those delegates. So he really didn't even focus on the other primaries. Obviously, it didn't work for him. But where you see more of like the two party in a national election, it could be easy to maybe understand that a politician might focus more on states like California, New York, areas like Chicago, and where there's just large pockets of people, and really focus on representing them, or spending more time and money on and really hearing about them versus everybody else. But I do agree with you that maybe we need to rewrite like the we need to California shouldn't be just 53 or 55 electoral, right? We need to get maybe more votes from California
That would
because the
be, yeah,
population's grown, right?
yeah. Unfortunately, that's a constitutional issue. Like they passed an amendment to cap it at 435,
Oh, okay.
and so it's going to require like a huge effort to potentially change that. But I mean, I will counter your counter about the focus of these politicians. The results of this, I guess, inequality in electoral votes has now caused, unfortunately, a lot of politicians take, certain states with very few seats for granted, like, oh, this is going to go blue or this is going to go red no matter what. And they're actually focusing more on swing states, which are the ones, I guess, that are in the middle.
Right.
And so, as far as each, state getting their just due of, campaigning and whatnot, the way it stands right now, there's still favoritism, or not favoritism, but like more focus on these swing states. We always hear about Ohio. We always hear
Michigan,
Michigan.
Florida.
There you go. But yeah, I mean, but I've with that, I did have another kind of a tandem issue that comes with fair representation, and that's this concept of party redistricting, which when it's done, illegally, it's considered gerrymandering. But unfortunately, with whichever party has control over state legislation, they usually skew the map in their direction, and some of these maps are drawn really uh, unnaturally, like the
Right.
carve outs, and they're specifically breaking up, whether it's groups of minorities or whatever the case is, and into just basically, a third will go here, a third will go there, and then watering
in their
down the voting
favor,
and
in
yeah,
their favor usually.
and watering down this the concentration of the voting power. So that's something that unfortunately the Supreme Court, they reviewed a case, but they kicked it back down. They said this is not us, this is states. You guys have to figure it out. And so
So what do you think would be a solution to that?
I mean, ideally an impartial third party like
Right,
regulator will go and like inspect each map, and it should be geographic. It shouldn't be there shouldn't be like these strange skinny carve outs, because at the end of the day, when a city is designed, it's done with a certain dimensions in mind. And when you end up like even some of the districts in California, I mean, I'm not sure how, like, I live in the city of Burbank, how half of Burbank is in one district, the other half is in another. I haven't questioned the cons that are associated with it. I mean, for whatever reason, that's the way it is. But I would imagine a individual city should be districted accordingly within the
right.
city lines, but unfortunately, that's not the case. And then my very last point with representation is something very simple. When it comes to voting day, whether it's for the primary or for the general, I guess just those two in mind. There should be national and statewide holidays. Just keep it simple.
Yep.
Everyone gets a day off and does the citizens, they hold their end of the bargain, and there's no excuses.
Sure.
And
I
that
think that's huge. I mean, I
Yeah,
put that on
that's
my list too.
bipartisan for sure. I
For
mean,
voter turnout, I think that, we shouldn't make it so difficult where people have to decide between um, going to work that
getting a
day or
paycheck, or
voting, or
catching a bus and all this and that.
right. And like all the planning that's involved with like making sure if you're doing mail-in vote, or did you register for mail-in vote, or
Right.
did you do all that kind of stuff. So
And polling
definitely I
centers,
think
polling
that,
centers need to be well staffed, well equipped, because we've been seeing consistently. Like, remember the long lines in uh, one of our last local elections. It was a
yeah.
huge issue. But
Yeah, and I mean that also I think plays, when you're talking about the redistricting redistricting,
yeah,
I always think about, whenever you see like these sports movies or sports where they try to redistrict to get the best athletes in their territory so that they could get the best sports teams for their school, high school, or whatever the case may be.
right.
So, and it's that same thought process where, politicians are looking for how do we get that competitive advantage to be able to make sure that we're always voting red, or we're always voting blue. And I think I think that one, like you said, a third party, or making it where as far as, I guess I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but more where how it how where that voting information is taken out, and it's more just based off of demographic, as far as just where spaces are, like um what makes it the most, I guess, efficient. And usually, doesn't that go by post offices? Am I wrong by thinking that, like, it all surrounds around
Like the
having like
zip
one post
code.
office per
It
per
could There could be. That's the
I
thing.
don't
It's that's a very gray area. Like, I was looking for like almost 45 minutes, maybe an hour yesterday on like the specific conditions of these lines, and like how much of it is regulated, and it's kind of like a whoever's in power kind of calls the shots. It seems like, whether it's
Yeah.
the drawn around the post office or whatever the case is.
And is that something that's done through? So is it done through senators? Is it done through mayors? Is it done through the governor? Like who?
I believe it's
What
the
state legislature
I believe it's the senators or members of House of Representatives.
in the
But
state, local,
yeah,
within the
it's on a
state?
state by state basis. Yeah, and I have a feeling the census does have some consideration there too. But it always really does come back down to the census in a lot of cases. Like, a lot of policy is determined by who's
I
who and
wonder.
who's where.
I wonder if there could be some kind of amendment or something done to. Well, I guess it's a state by state issue, so you can't really. It's not a federal thing, but maybe if there's some kind of federal law where it limits that, maybe you can only redistrict if there's a certain like maybe only like 60-40, or like a 50-50 split within the House and Dem. So it's not just like 70-30, where basically it's going to go, where it's just a huge majority where it doesn't matter what the opposing side is thinking. Like we
Yeah,
have the majority to actually push it
depending
through
on, yeah,
regardless.
right, right,
So maybe if there, it could be like certain things can only come up if there is a
right.
certain,
A
um,
trigger, yeah, yeah,
so, and that could maybe protect it where it just won't get pushed through unless it is a truly bipartisan, vote type of thing. So,
yeah, man.
um, when it comes to back to representation, I think that's a huge thing because, I think one of the things that I feel is like, you put somebody in office and then you have really no say of how they're actually going to govern. And I think this happens a lot when it comes to any position, right? There's certain campaign promises, like a politician breaking a campaign promise is pretty much like common knowledge now. Like the fact, it's actually surprising when a politician keeps the campaign promise more
Sure.
than actually. So I think that there's a disconnect with people actually feeling like they have. On a federal level an actual say in things that actually happen. And I think, I got this actually from Kyle Kalinske, who's a political mind, has his own TV podcast and, YouTube show and whatnot. And he talked about, I think I saw this on when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, but you know how like on state, ballots, we have certain like where we're voting like to legalize marijuana or to like certain things where it's just
Measures,
like
sure.
measures are, I forget the actual term for it. It's not like
Propositions,
amendments, propositions. There it is,
sure.
where us as a people make a direct impact on a law that actually happens in that state,
Right, right,
right? So, but we don't have that on a federal level. So I think that maybe uh, the it should be like deemed where the Congress has to come up with 3 to 5 propositions each year or something like that, where as a nation we could vote on it, where it's not just about congressmen and the House and the Senate are the only people that get to decide it. Like us as a people get to vote on it. So like say for example like legalizing marijuana federally, or gay rights or gay marriage or something like that, or certain things that aren't necessarily changing constitutional stuff maybe, but are just more like bills, uh that we as a we could have like just a popular vote where it's just okay, these are the 5 federal propositions that are there, and the
right.
whole nation gets to vote on it, which gives us the direct impact on changing federal laws that impact us as a nation.
Right. I mean, I'm kind of reminiscing on like Schoolhouse Rock. I'm only a Bill. Unfortunately, this is U.S. history was not my strong subject. Ironically, as we're discussing this, but if I'm not mistaken, the way that we have our system set up is when in terms of federal bills, I guess we we have the ability to propose, not even propose, but like start the petitioning for some federal law, which then would, I think, get handed to our congressperson or maybe our senator, and then they would then vote in Congress, I think. So I think, unfortunately for federal law, we are not, we the people are not trusted with the direct vote. I think it gets handed off to, if it gains enough traction.
Yeah,
It gets.
we have no
So,
access. Like how
I
many
mean,
petitions get that we see online where it's like sign this petition, and it's to get people like get make our congressperson or make our senators like understand this is an important thing to us. But then once we tell them, it really is whatever they want to do with it. You know what I mean? We don't have an actual say in
it's a baton pass. It's that
sure.
relay, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and everything we're talking about is not is changing fundamentally like things that we do in our government. So I don't know how we're gonna actually get to a point where we're doing, but these are like some of the ideas where I think, where it comes to representation, like I think that the problem becomes, right? So will a senator, so say for example, maybe something that isn't so Democrat Republican thing, let's just say legalizing marijuana, right? On a federal level.
I think most conservative red states are not in favor right now.
I mean, but that's what I'm saying. So let's say, for example, um, federally, right? There's a majority of people that actually want to legalize marijuana, but let's say the senator personally
Mm-hmm.
isn't a fan of it,
Right.
right? So would they vote against what their personal beliefs are because they're the people that they represent want it?
Right.
And that's something where we don't really know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we don't really get that information, where we can't go to every single person in the country and be like, how would you want it? How, but we should maybe like there should be certain things that we as a nation could vote on because it's affecting us, right?
Right.
And I think that it doesn't have to be like every single bill or every single topic, but they should be able to pick maybe like two or three things that they could just put as propositions for on a federal ballot where we're just not voting for president, we're actually voting for actual legislation that is going to affect us federally as well. I think that would be something that gives us more say over
Mm-hmm.
laws that we have to abide by,
Right.
type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, just from my non nuanced understanding of how our government is, we are not entrusted, because I think when things are at a federal level, they're scrutinized. They're really run through every potential ringer, whether
We
it's,
hope.
I mean, whether it's in the Senate, or whether it's in the House of Representatives, or it's on the president's desk. Like there's checks and balances along the way to prevent bad legislation from being passed through. And
But
so,
we do it at a state level, right? We vote there's propositions that we vote for on a state level,
I mean,
so
that's the thing
we
is
could do.
there's more flexibility at the state level, as we see with these kind of bipartisan top, or not even bipartisan, but these polarizing issues, right? States are structured to bear the brunt of these potentially bad propositions and bills, because it's less of an effort to undo such a bad legislation at a state level, versus if something becomes federal, then the magnitude of the change, it's harder to manage and potentially reverse if things go wrong. So that's just my guess
But
in.
but at the end of the day, who decides whether it was wrong or right? Right? We're not talking about actual
I
like
mean,
us.
the next election would determine if something is,
Sure.
if the
And we're
people
not
are.
talking about us actually writing a bill, right? We're talking about a proposition that's just already written by whatever whomever is writing the bills, like whether that it goes through Congress already, here's the bill, or just like, something simple like should we legalize marijuana nation federally? Should this be should
I mean, and
should I'm just using that as an example because it's not really a bill. It's just like yes or no, right? So
right.
certain propositions like that, if if a majority of the nation wants to legalize marijuana, then it should be legal, right? And then at least that way, it's not like I mean, to me that makes sense, right? Because it kind of goes through representing the people. If people want it, they should have it. Like, why should it? If a majority of people want it, but it's not because of the representatives aren't pushing that through, for what once again it's to cut out corporatism because what it like if they're voting, are they voting based off of the common person, or are they voting based off of big business that's holding whatever back, and so that's an extra layer that we could get rid of on a few topics, right? Not
Sure.
necessarily every single bill, but a few propositions. I think that would be a thing that would get people excited about voting.
My last argument against such a thing would be, again, if you take legalization of marijuana, there was a long time, I believe, federally, where it was being presented and shot down because of X number of governors, X number of states, and who is left unhappy with that outcome is all of these states who, they felt like their citizens are ready for this, and to keep getting let down at that federal level once these other states have a say in the conversation. That's the one downside, is that sometimes it can prevent progress if, just because the whole country is not ready for it, partial, let's say even a slight majority has to suffer with the lack of legislation. So you know uh that's just what comes to mind most recently with legalization of marijuana, because once Colorado and Oregon were able to pass it, then we sort of saw the ripple effect of all these other states deciding that they're going to get on board. So, some yeah,
And
so,
that it shouldn't negate, because there's always going to be the different, like there's always going to be states' rights versus federal rights. But I'm saying, like, right now federally it's illegal, but in California,
I
in
mean, I
certain
would say
states it's
about like
legal,
20 something states. Yeah.
right?
Um,
So, like, if they did take it to a national vote, it might pass. So like it's we don't know,
I
and if
mean,
it does
I don't say
pass,
it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to present it, because at the end of the day, the states will continue to do the state thing, and it's just a matter of, yeah, the federal government finally giving the green light and saying, hey, it can be where states are allowed to have their autonomy over whatever issue, but to have uniformity, if the people in, again, Wyoming want to have legalized marijuana, they deserve to have it on their ballot. Uh, so yeah, I guess in a sense, it, again,
yeah. And I think there's broad national topics that could be put up for, and like I said, once again, it's going back to the underlying issue of us us not being representative, right?
yeah.
Same type of mentality of electoral college versus
I
popular
was gonna say,
vote.
would you
you know
suggest a popular vote for these type of
That's what I'm saying. I'm
so
saying popular vote. So like you vote, like just propositions where it's not by electoral college. It's just straight yes or no. There's, if 60 million people voted, 40 million voted yes, 20 million voted no, so it passes. It's a new federal,
right?
like, proposition. That's what I'm talking
Yeah, amen. Give me the presidency too, and I'm on board. um,
about. So I guess another thing. So we talked about voter turnout. We talked about term limits. Did you have one off the top of your head that you wanted? I got a
uh,
couple more.
I mean, I got a couple that are less to do with, I guess, voting, and more to do with policy and the system itself. I think one is direct related to a hot current event with race relations, and specifically with regards to African Americans. The concept of reparations. I, you know, I used to think of it as a very extreme idea with not much knowledge, but um, the more I do read about it and gain perspective on where we are as a nation and what issues we see consistently coming to the forefront, uh, you know, when you uh, when you look at statistics, black on black crime, very high, poverty levels of African American families, the wealth and income disparity. You look at education, the school systems in certain African American neighborhoods. Uh, there's there's a plethora, there's a laundry list of issues that and then this notion of the last 30, 40 years of policing these neighborhoods even harder. Naturally you're going to see negative results. And so, yeah, my argument starts with it starts with addressing the income inequality, because essentially reparations would be paying some sort of installment payments to African Americans. But if you trace back to the most recent, uh, I guess, legalized policy that created this condition of black people in a ghetto, you can look at redlining, which had been going on, after even after segregation, when black men and women had the right to vote, but when it came to going out and acquiring a loan to get to get a house, or whatever the case is, uh, they were being targeted. They're predatory banking institutions who were giving them horrible terms. If you pay half of your mortgage over time and you miss 1 month's payment, they would void the whole deed, take the property away, and keep all the money. Like these type of tactics, and then decreasing the value of predominantly black neighborhoods. uh, you know there was a specific effort in that industry done to keep black areas poor, impoverished, and without uh, the proper infrastructure. And so, also the notion of, okay, well, black people have had so much time on in this country to get their, economic standards high, whatever the case is, find success entrepreneurially. Unfortunately, when you do see a lot of cases of black entrepreneurs, finding some level of wealth, the drop off back to poverty is very high within 1 or 2 generations statistically. Um, and at the end of the day, when you look at the the jarring headlines of gang violence, drug related crime, crime in general in the black community, all of it is usually associated with poverty. Poverty creates the conditions to where robbing a burglarizing, robbing, joining a gang, selling drugs. These things become outlets, avenues for your income and your well being. Living in this dark, dark side of the underworld, essentially. Um, and even when you look at the current job market, it's still well documented that African Americans going through an interview process are automatically, their resumes are passed off just based on their name half the time, and immigrants too, but this is not about immigrants. um, and I look at the basics. Who are black leaders that are proposing ideas. Malcolm X, his main solution was black people should make every effort to build their own businesses, have decent housing, patronize and hire their own kind whenever, however possible. And all it takes, just in my mind's eye, is a little bit of capital, a little bit of comfort zone as far as financially, to where you won't have to see the desperation that's so common. And as far as the funding of this, where would it come from? I'll have to give Lil Boosie Badass a little credit. He pitched the idea of taking a little bit of money off the military spending. Statistically, we spent 2020 721 billion in the military. Only 9 was mandatory spending. The rest was all in preparation for XYZ. A big hot topic is police funding. Just demilitarize the police, take off all the extra tanks and whatever else. There's no, as we've seen, the vast majority of this country doesn't want to see a police force that is strapped to the T. They want to see some, scaled back version, which is, relative to the issues that are happening on the ground. And we talk about corporations. Create some sort of a reparations tax bracket on any corporation making over $1 billion in revenue, and specifically any industries that are directly related to slavery, the cotton industry, insurance industries that were targeting black people. And
So how would this look as far as like, would it just be a check that's given to every black person? Would it be
I mean,
like what does reparations look like in 2020?
well, one thing I would say is it wouldn't be perpetual. I would measure it, and this is like a very uh, debatable cutoff, but the first quote unquote officially counted slave in the United States was what, 1654, and the supposed abolition of slavery was 1865. So I would use those. That's 211 years. So I would start with 211 years of reparations due. And as far as yeah, I would imagine it would either be a yearly or a monthly stipend. Um, we saw how the stimulus check did. The stimulus check almost was kind of like a preview of universal basic income. I feel like, um, you know, we haven't quite seen how the results are turning out with how people have spent that money. But as in terms of reparations, I would imagine, let's say a black family, a household of four, they would be due X amount of dollars, maybe a couple thousand per month, just to give that wiggle room, because at the
Now,
end of
who
the day,
gets that money? Is it just the parents? Is it the
it
children?
would
Is
have to
it
be
how many generations get that?
it would have to be based on how people are doing their taxes. I think that's how our stimulus checks, whoever received one, That's how that was determined. I feel like I think.
So if there's already a really wealthy person of Africa, like say like Will Smith, he doesn't get
I
reparations
mean, the
because he's already
idea of
rich.
reparations specifically would be to improve the conditions of those below the poverty line. So it would almost, and it's going to sound controversial now that I use the phrasing, I just thought of it as like an African American's welfare, specifically for them, but with the intention of uh, obviously to repay the debt that was uh, given by their great 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 grandparents. Um, and I look at it in the same vein as Native Americans. They have reservations, and I have a whole nother spiel on them as well. Um, but the same, not the same injustice, but the magnitude of the injustices and how the trajectory of these two minorities have been altered forever based on the early stages of this country. I think here's my man Trump's. He said it best to the African Americans. He said, "What do you guys have to lose?" I feel like we should try it out. Obviously there's a financial impact that's going to be.
Well, I think the biggest issue with that, and like I said, obviously we agree that there's definitely discrepancies as far as there are inequalities that there's a layer or a bridge that needs to be there that makes it an even playing field that isn't there right now. I agree
Right.
with you that, and you could look at it through the school systems in inner cities, through, housing, things of that nature, access to jobs. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. Now, I guess the problem with reparations, in my eyes, is the country, as far as the type of people that are in the country, is vastly different from when there was racism, right? There's so much more immigration.
There's
There's
still
so much
racism.
more. No, I'm saying slavery. I'm sorry.
Slavery.
If I
Yeah.
mean slavery, I meant to say slavery. So basically, where it's a right now to pay people reparations, we're taking from people that necessarily had nothing to do with slavery, right? Like like for you and me, we had nothing to do with slavery.
We have
If
nothing
we
to do
were
with Native Americans being displaced, but
Sure, but there's not money that's taken out of our pockets to give to Native Americans. They're able to make their money through. They were given land that they were given, able to do casinos and gambling and stuff like
it's
that.
there are carve
To
outs, but
to
our
to,
taxes dollars still there's a trickle down into the.
but it's not what you're talking about. It's a monthly check that each person that's Native American is getting based off of it, right?
Unfortunately,
What
no. I wish the Native Americans would get the monthly checks too.
Sure, but what I'm saying is, like I'm saying, it's kind of like if we're taking it from, um, say like something happened between you and me, and somebody else has to pay. It's just as far as just like a one-to-one thing. It's not that anymore. Like it's not like the people that actually were slave owners are the ones that are paying the debt type of thing, right? So that's going to be like just over as far as like a national thing. It's like, okay, well, definitely slavery is there, but who has to pay for that? And if we say, okay, everybody has to pay for that, well, if I was never a slave owner, why do I have to give somebody something when I'm in that same situation? Like, not saying me specifically, but poverty isn't only a black problem, right? There's Hispanics, there's whites, there's Indians, there's Chinese, there's all these kinds of things, right? So it's like, where is it that it's just slavery that caused this poverty, or is it, where does choices also play a role, right? So like,
Or lack
are
thereof.
well, I'm saying like, so would somebody who has a felony, like murdered somebody, do they get reparations? Is somebody who
I would say
has
up until somebody commits a felony, they would be eligible.
so then how is that so then it comes to the argument like, well, if we're deciding which people get it and which people don't get it, how is that
I
making
mean,
it,
we
how
would
is that
theoretically we would start with null zero. Anybody who has existing records will still get that initial reparation or begin to get it. And then if while everyone is getting that reparation, somebody commits a felony, a murder, then you'd remove that right. And then as far as again the individual taxpayer, I don't think in my plan, which I feel like I'm a freaking politician, which may be in my
Yeah.
cards. None of these tax dollars outside of the corporations, the cotton industry per se, which at that point, if you run a corporation, then you're in a huge tax bracket anyways. But no, nobody who's making the type of money that maybe you or I are making would be responsible for this. It would all
Well,
be
where does
existing.
military funding come from?
Again, this would be just reallocating. Whatever the existing standards are, or the appointments are. I mean, I would just take slivers of these. Like,
But that funding is coming from people's tax dollars, right?
I
So it is
mean,
coming from
by
everybody's tax dollars.
by we would be losing that money either way. It's that money is being spent
But
on
it's
some
being
aspect of the
but
government.
right,
It's
but
not new
certain
tax.
as
It's not new taxing. It's existing.
but what I'm saying as far as an individual, right? So if I give my money to the government and they use it on the military, that's something that's directly benefiting me as far as protection.
Here's my
If that
karma.
money's going
Sure,
to, well, let me get my point out
please.
first. If that money is then going to pay off reparations, that's not necessarily something that's actively benefiting me. That's just kind of solving an issue that I had nothing to deal with, right? So and that sounds harsh, but I'm just kind of speak as far as like devil's
I
advocate.
hear you.
I think that I think that there's different ways, and once again, we were talking about fundamental changes as far as government. This is going into more policy, I guess, as far as us what we should fund and what we shouldn't fund type of things. So which is fine, um, but I look at it like it one, how long does it go for? Two,
211 years.
who, huh?
211
200 years.
years. 211 years based on how long technically slavery was legal. Even though it was slavery was going on for a lot longer before and after abolishment, um, because a lot of southern previous slave owners retained their slaves as indentured servants practically. But that's a different argument. But no, I hear you on this. Were you still
Well,
gonna go in on this?
I'm saying like who gets it? How long do they get? So like at a certain point, it looks like because we're using 2020 dollars to make up a debt that was from the 1600s or whatever. Like 40 acres and a mule is not the same as
Yeah, I was
maybe
just
the
thinking of
type of money that
40 grand and a
so
Ford.
yeah, but say
I'm
like,
playing.
so for example, what I'm saying is that like at a certain point, are we overcompensating where it makes it an unequal on the
Sure.
other side?
Yeah, yeah.
Because, if somebody's getting a check for the next 200 years, they have a way better opportunity than
That's
somebody
the
that
point.
doesn't
That's the
have that.
point. They need a better
But
opportunity. Generations of black people need better
but it's
opportunities.
making it unequal in the other sense. So anybody that comes in this country right now is gonna be the new class that doesn't have that same advantage,
I
right?
mean,
So
okay,
like if
go ahead.
but that's what I'm saying. So
Sure.
you're creating an inequality the other way.
Okay. So I will kind of in tandem address both of the items that you mentioned. So as far as that military spending goes, I think a great, uh, you know, acclamation for that military African American tax would be to pay back the military debt all those African American soldiers who participated and sacrificed their lives and came back to a country that didn't give a shit about them. That military tax for African Americans will be under that in honor of those veterans. Because when we
But
talk,
that doesn't take away from you're taking it from people that didn't
listen,
have anything to do with
listen,
that.
listen. I heard you on that.
Hmm.
When let's say when an immigrant, our parents or your father, my father came into this country, uh, obviously the free market, the opportunity to, or the potential to, create generations of wealth, own land here. Those are all great aspects. Um, but the debt that we do come into is having a country that has a strong military. So, just like people in England are still paying whatever percentage to the royal family, it's there's a certain legacy involved in any nation, right? The spirit and the soul of this country is built on black labor. The reason why businesses did so well in the early stages of this country, the Industrial Revolution, is because there was, up until the Industrial Revolution, there was free labor, and you and I both know the value of free labor.
Sure,
There must be some sort of uh, eventual karma slash counterbalance to all that free labor. You're
sure.
why our parents came in. Let me finish my point.
We're
Let me
not.
finish my point. Hey, I
What I'm.
heard you. I
Okay,
heard
go
you. Let
ahead.
me finish my points. Our parents came to this country because of the economic opportunity here. Why was there economic opportunity here and not in any of these other colonized countries? More so because there was the amount of free labor that set up the economy to flourish, to thrive, to create booming businesses left and right, to create so many uh, you know, advancements in technology, sciences, whatever the case is. None of that happens without free labor. So it is an assumed, just the way we culturally, emotionally, we see these protests associated with white police officers killing black lives, or any police officer killing black lives. There are certain givens in this country. There's an emotional attachment and triggering that comes with the image of a black man being oppressed. That's it's like it's like saying there was a my house burnt down for X amount of years. I have to acknowledge that that happened. I cannot disregard it. So in that light, I say it's it's in order to appreciate the fruits of that free labor, there has to be a debt paid. Because right now, there's been no debt paid. There was small attempts at reparations immediately after abolishment, which at that time it didn't seem so radical. It was literally, hey, yesterday you were a slave, today you're on your own. You deserve some sort of help. Unfortunately, that help was very much thwarted by the powers that be because, there was systematic oppression after abolishment to prevent black people from being successful. There was, again, lack of opportunities, the same lack of opportunities, not quite the same, because again, the numbers have expanded over time. Black people have been able to do amazing, miraculous things with the little bit that this government has given them. But the potential for black success, black excellence, a black economy flourishing on its own is there. And I feel like, this is it's the country's karma. That's what I put it. That's what I put it down to at the end. But go ahead.
Well, I look at it as far as I agree with you as far as there needs to be, um, like I said, there needs to be that
The
bridge to
root of
make
the
up.
issues.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if reparations is the way because, like I said, I think we're trying to solve a problem that was back when slavery was there, which was, a few hundred years ago. I don't know the exact year that like
Uh,
actual slavery was abolished.
Legally,
Um,
1865.
okay, so 1865. So with how society is in 2020, right? So I look at it already like, all right, well, in these areas, there's no like all black areas, right? They're all going to be integrated with different people. There's going to be majority black areas.
Yeah,
There's
there's
going to be like a certain area, right? But
in the South.
so, say for example, we're giving reparations to just the African Americans, black people, all the automatically those people that are also in that area that don't get reparations now become, now they have they're if we're not fixing the playing field for everybody in those areas, if we're only doing it through reparations, I don't think that that's necessarily the way. I think that there's better ways through education, through giving more like maybe maybe everybody gets free college, maybe everybody gets some kind of like
That's
grant
reparations.
toward.
Free college is reparations, baby.
Sure, sure, but it's not like
Money. It's money. You're just
right.
telling them
I'm
the money has to go towards college as opposed to small
no,
business, which is fine.
I'm saying
I'll take
I'm
any piece of this cake.
yeah, but what I'm saying is you're advocating for a 200-year monthly payment
Monthly or
to every
yearly.
single whatever it is to every single black person in America, right? So it's to me,
Non-immigrant.
yeah. So every single person that was
African American.
effectively
African American. Yeah, yeah.
effectively like it came from is only here because of slavery,
Yeah,
right?
and I think some
So
level of proving their lineage to, would be uh, recommended, but I don't know. You can't really enforce a lot of those tangibles. But go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean now if you're half black, you're an eighth
You'd
black,
get a
like who
percentage of it. You'd get a
So we're
percentage
looking
based
at,
on your blackness.
yeah. So I mean, like, it seems. I think that there's a. I think that there. I think that it'd be a very difficult thing to enact, but that doesn't necessarily mean it shouldn't be done. I just think there's more effective ways to make that even versus just a monthly or yearly kind of payout. I do think that there needs to be a way to get make you know poor communities, and not just for Black people, for everybody that's poor, give those same opportunities to even the playing field. I think this mentality that if everybody is in America, they have the same opportunity or the same starting point is not accurate. And I don't think that it's ever going to be completely even. But I think there should be this like baseline that we feel like everybody should be able to start from. And there's going to be people that are under that baseline right now that we need to elevate to that baseline.
The black people.
And well, it's not just Black people, like I'm saying.
Didn't you
I
say
think
the
it's
Asian Americans are the highest earning? Which last time I checked, they're making more than white people on average.
sure,
Uh,
but I think there's Hispanic people that fall into
but do
that
you know who's at the
category.
bottom
There's,
of the list?
I'm
Black
sure it's
people.
Black people,
So then we should
right?
start at the bottom, and then we'll once we
But
we
I'm
we
saying attack. I'm saying attack those areas, those areas where poverty is the most,
sure.
and you bring up that to the baseline versus just arbitrarily. Well,
It's
and
not
you know
arbitrary.
what?
It's by design. The order of operations. Who's most hurt? Who's killing each other the most? Who is infested with crime and drugs? Which communities are in the worst shape? And if you can draw a through line between slavery, segregation to the ghettos that we see today, that there's no clearer evidence, in my opinion, to give attention to that community first. Then you can address Latin American communities. I mean, I've got tons of ideas for immigration, of course, as well. But I think it's just what is the most like? Why did this country come to a standstill? Black
but
Americans.
I feel like we're
Black
not.
Lives
I
Matter
think we're
is the
saying this.
greatest movement we've seen in the last, however many years. It's
I think that we're
it's not a
saying the same
coincidence.
thing, but I think that maybe I'm not speaking to it the right way. You're saying we need to affect these areas. I think that's accurate, right?
It's not even areas. It's
But
people. It's people.
which are where these people are. So
I mean, just
anytime
because
I
you don't have
say,
a concentration of black people in there, I just mean black people first. They should get the special attention in this country to make up for the 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 horrible start they've had, because most black people are in a net negative in wealth. Like they're being born into net negative, which is absurd, but it's possible. It's from generations of lack of education, lack of opportunity. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
so I'm saying let's go into these communities and make that. And I mean, like,
I feel
okay,
like
I
we've
mean,
done
if
that. We've been trying to, put, these smaller measures in place to help schools, buying a bunch of computers, LeBron James, I promise. It's that process it's a little bit, it's not proven. I feel like we've been waiting on that, and the results are still like Chicago has these murder rates, man. Like, if why is
yeah, but
black
I
life
mean,
not valued, man? That's the raw question I'm asking.
I don't know if that's the. I think you're saying valued by whom? You know what I mean?
Each
Like it's
other
valued by.
by
I think it
by
is.
the
I think
authority.
it's. Yeah, I think is it seen through government policies? That once again, I think that's also goes back to the class thing that I was talking about, as far as
Reparations,
the.
get their class up.
But you're speaking specifically to a race.
Yes, I'm
I'm
addressing the
talking about.
fire first. What's on fire right now? The black community is on fire. Literally, they're setting buildings on fire. They want attention, so we
So
have to
this.
assuage them.
Okay, but I mean, like I said, I don't. I think that I think that is
There's
more
money.
rich
There's money
versus poor.
available. There's money available to put out this fire, because at the end of the day, what were the biggest complaints about these violent protests? Right? It was people.
Ooh, sorry.
You're good. Don't get violent. No. It's these protests were bleeding over into spaces where other people's lives and livelihoods, their businesses and whatnot, were being jeopardized. And so, in order to prevent this type of civil unrest and to appease a whole race of people in this country, address what they're what they're at. And honestly, like most people who are very very deep into the Black Lives Matter movement know very well that police brutality is just one of the many pieces of this puzzle. The housing, the healthcare, the education, the lack of job opportunities. There's literally a list of things that they're waiting for next. Equal representation in public office. So um, that's why I feel like it's still at the black struggle is still at the core of this country's dysfunctionality. Um, and obviously the class issues are there, but the fact that one race has been subject to consistent oppression, whether it was enslavement, which is so bizarre now in 2020, and then that the segregation, which is sometimes a little bit more cruel because it's the mentality is there, but it's like lying to people in their face. It's there's just so many, and then the eventual lynchings that you would see. I'm thinking of Emmett Till. I'm thinking of uh, just throughout history how atrocious the black experience has been for for a majority. And again, we have a luxury of only being in this more peaceful era, uh you know growing up in the 90s and the 2000s. But the civil rights movement was not long ago, bro. Like 55 years. Our parents have been around longer than civil rights in this country. The people who are
Hmm.
not allowed to go to the same businesses
Well, I
are
think we
still
agree.
alive.
I think, and we could talk about this for hours, but I think we both agree that needs to be something done financially to create that create that barrier where everybody is like at least has a chance at an equal starting point. I think we disagree as far as maybe how that gets implemented,
Sure. I mean, if you
but
give me the education, the scholarships, or
yeah, I think
something,
there's a
I'll
lot of
take it.
stuff
I'll
that
take it.
I think there's a lot. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that have tried to do that, and there's definitely need to be things there. But I completely agree that there
you
needs to be
you are the
more
one who showed me
investment
the
in.
statistics when you showed me that the black on black crime is so far higher than any white on black crime in this country. I thought, okay, yeah, we are sensationalizing one aspect of it, but we need to address the greater issues. Why is something statistically stayed so consistent? Why has this problem been around for so long? And so
I
that's
mean, I think, and I think there's underlying issues for that. This is a. I think there's a. It's always kind of like a little bit of a tough conversation to have because I think that within the black community, there's debates as to what is the best way
oh,
to get
there's
out of the
definitely
thing.
folks who don't want
So
it.
it's not just there's not just this underlying thing that it's like if you give all of our people money that our problems are gonna be solved. And so that's where it's kind of like okay, well, um, maybe there needs to be just a black election where they just vote certain representatives that go into government as far as like or help decide what needs to happen because you know us trying to decide what's best for
Yeah, there's
the
something
black
a little
community is
weird
kind
about
of
that.
like the same. Yeah, so that's where I always get a little bit hesitant because I'm like, well, maybe the black community doesn't think reparations is there
Right.
because it's kind of our privilege to even say that this is going to make up for it. Maybe they think that maybe there's this thought process that you know giving us money isn't going to change. We'd rather have this. Let them come up with maybe some ideas for the solutions, and then we could kind of
Yeah.
go from there. But I think we both agree something needs to be done because it's not it's like that white elephant in the room, big, where it keeps getting ignored, pushed under the rug, brushed under the rug, and we need to make a direct movement in to fix those injustices that have happened
Yeah,
not so
man.
long ago, right?
I agree, and again, this was never my idea. Reparations has been on the table for for centuries,
Well,
not centuries, decades.
it was promised, right?
Yeah, it
It
was
was
promised,
promised
and
back in
it
the day.
never not consistently delivered. And the president again, I'll give props to Lil Boosie who kind of put the notion in my brain, and because he was the one who came up with this military spending idea. And then one of the great voices right now, he's a writer, Tanasi Coates. He has a really brilliant piece on his justification for reparations. It's called The Case for Reparations. So I highly suggest anybody
Hmm.
read that. I listened to the audio. And so the
But
idea,
there's like completely opposite. If you go to Thomas Sowell, who's a black economist, he's going to talk about how reparations isn't going to be there. There's going to be a lot of
I would argue that
thought
the
principles.
wealthier the black person, the less likely that he'll think reparations is a solution. But I guarantee you, people who are in poverty, people who are resorting to gangs, resorting to drug dealing, resorting to any sort of criminal activity, if you tell them, "Hey, we're giving you a couple grand, you don't have to go do this illegal act." I mean, that's you're gonna see vast improvements in safety and in just the development of these communities, as opposed to since the 60s, 70s, 80s, crack epidemic, so on and so forth. Uh,
You think it's only poor people that are doing crimes?
no, I do believe there are rich gang members, rich drug
Hmm.
dealers, but
They're
nobody.
just making money in illegal ways, right?
I think the entry point into these lives, it's usually, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but I think the vast majority of people get involved in these things initially, at least people of color, because I'm sure there's a level of like corporate crime that wealthy families get inherited into. But
Right.
as
And we
far
see
as
very rich, we
as
see
far as
rich
sure,
rappers
but as far as violent crimes
involved.
on the streets of Chicago and the streets of South Central, certain parts in New York and the South, Michigan, I would argue that it's
Here
a
in
lot of
Compton
it
lots.
a lot of it has to do with just there's no money, crabs in a bucket. This guy has got something, I don't have this. Nipsey Hussle we hear about. There's just so much pain and like vitriol associated with some of these murders that we hear about. Just the fact that like literally every weekend in Chicago there's multiple young black death. And it's I again like you said, it's not our uh, forte to be offering solutions, but just receiving that information all day or all the time, there's only so much that I can just ignore it. And now it's like, what are the real solutions?
Yeah, we could offer solutions. We can't say that this is going to fix. It's not our place to
Yeah,
decide that
this is their
this makes up
solution
for it.
that I'm supporting. I'm just advocating for the
Right.
population, the percentage who do support it, of course. But yeah, man,
Right.
we dwelled on that one for quite a bit, man.
Right.
I'll let you pivot.
Cool. So I actually just have a few more points to kind of go our underlying thing, like what would actually help certain things as far as um, overall government. So I think another major issue is voter education, as far as like knowing who to vote for and what we're actually voting for, what's
It's
actually
hard, dude.
happening.
I have a hard time picking up those
Yeah.
guidebooks.
Yeah, I mean, I think just transparency overall in the system. There's a lot of trust that is going in. We're hoping that everything is just happening, and we just do the vote and just hope that things. And I think there needs to be more transparency. So a couple of things that I think can help is one is like maybe some kind of bipartisan website that is just there to inform people about a certain about candidates, right? So it's not something that a Democrat puts together, a Republican puts together. Like no it's like it has to be completely bipartisan, and it's just factual information like who they are, why they want to run, certain like maybe major issues, whether they be like local elections or national elections, and just where they stand on that. If they've been in politics before, what's their history? And if they haven't been in politics, what's their history as far as like certain things that are there that people could just look at and very simply just be like, okay, they feel this way on this. This is why they feel this way on this. Like, and just easily accessible. Um, can do the research and you know make it a simpler process as far as knowing who a person is versus along with obviously the debates and all this kind of stuff, but something that's just there that could be trusted by the nation as this isn't left leaning, right leaning. It's just factual information
Mhm.
that about each person that's running that we can learn about, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I usually have stumbled on these websites, like, because I'll Google whenever I'm sparked interest. I will Google, what this measure means, what this proposition is, who this candidate is. I want to think like Ballotopedia, and there's one other. These are .orgs, by the way. But there's one or two resources that I've just stumbled upon in Googling
Yeah,
what is the meat and potatoes of this policy or this candidate. So I feel like it exists, but again, it's the effort required to obtain it.
it's not in the fabric of our voting
It
process,
should
right? It's not
it
something.
should be paraded and put into the forefront as opposed to the scandal, the gossip, the
and and somehow regulated, right? Somehow that we could trust that this information is accurate, this information isn't biased. Because the problem is, like, a lot of times when you're getting information about people, you're getting it from either their own websites, which obviously is putting it in the best light for themselves, or you're getting it from a contrarian view that's going to put it in the most negative
right, right.
perspective as possible. As far as just factual, just like um, do they, are they pro-life? Yes. Are they pro?
Definitely those I've seen one resource at least in the last couple of elections that's been up. I can't think of the name, but it's just a matter of again putting in the effort and searching it up.
Yeah,
It's
and
not it's
making
not
it
even
for everybody,
necessarily the first result. Actually, it's like two or three down, in my
right?
experience.
And then, and then another thing is just these huge bills that come out, right? So like
Oh,
just
200, 400, 500 pages.
300, 500 pages. So like, there's one thing in it that makes it sound good. It's kind of
You
just
can
like how
squeeze in
articles are,
you can squeeze in mass murder into one of these joints, and most
and we
people
wouldn't
won't
know,
know.
won't even know. And I think that just limiting how many things can be thrown into the same
And
bill,
sometimes
like
they do it the
making
night
it,
before something is due. It's like,
and it's stuff that we don't even get to see before they're voting on it. You know what I mean? And even if we do get to see it, how much change, like, once again, going back to the point, like, we really want, once we've given our vote to the congressman or the senator, it's really out of our hands as far as which way they vote on
right,
that.
right.
We could make our voice heard and say vote no, vote no, vote no, but at the end of the day, whatever they choose, they're going to vote whichever way they decided to choose. And if they're protected by corporate spending, a lot of times they're not fearful of not being able to get voted out the next time because they know they're going to have more money than any
Right.
person
It's in their
challenging them and
pocket.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that there should be like a limit and like smaller bills that are just easy to read, clean, that don't have all this extra stuff. Like, work harder, man. You guys are getting all of your money from us. Your salaries are from us. You could spend more time debating bills, more times all this. And I think the debates would be smaller if the bills are smaller because there's less points and less, like, because usually it's like a 500-page bill and it's like this one little aspect that they're trying to get out or get in. And it's like takes forever. Like the spending bills, it was really like one or two things that was point of contention that held back, all that. And there were large bills anyway that ended up going to more corporate spending anyways versus money directly to people and helping people and
Right.
stuff like that. But all of that gets lost when these huge 500-page bills. I think there needs to be more transparency, and that comes from, smaller bills that people can understand as far as
Yeah.
like what's actually being voted on.
When we're not pressed against the gun, which I feel like when this stimulus package was put together, and you would think that that would be a very focused, micro level passage, but unfortunately, the nature of this government is such that there's just tentacles in every little aspect of the economy of public policy. So simplifying would be ideal, but I think when you have to address so many caveats within whatever industry, whatever tax bracket. I mean, I think it just the fluff eventually comes out of it. Even though if the intention was, bail out the obviously have small businesses taken care of, have individual taxpayers under a certain threshold taken care of. Then you look at the most hurt of industries. Was it travel industry, airline industry? But it's kind of like it's kind of a rabbit hole. I feel like when you get into a conversation of uh, how to fix a frozen economy, which is what we experienced, right? So,
Right, and but
uh,
that's just one example. This
but
is
in the
still
past,
happening
yeah, and I agree, and
even when there's not, right? And it's
right,
all this poor quarrel spending,
right,
like, that little things that are just missed. Like
right,
we as a society don't even know that that was a law. It happened under, like under this huge law that we were excited about, and then all of a sudden all this other stuff was in there that we
right,
had no idea was even thrown in there.
yeah,
So I think that needs to definitely change. I remember Herman Cain, who was running for the Republican nominee. He brought that up, and I remember seeing it as a joke on Jon Stewart when he said, I'm gonna make it so that there's only one page bills, and it was like
I wish,
comedic, like I don't like to read, like they were
right,
making fun of him like that. But I think that that's really important that
yeah,
there's more transparency, that we could actually understand what's going on
right.
with these bills.
And on the flip side of the one main argument or one main issue, and then throwing in all these hidden agendas in within it, is when certain policy gets held up hostage because there's so many other intangibles that are
Right.
included. Like a lot of times with immigration, that's usually it. Like immigration is held hostage because it's tied to so many other things. It's kind of like a trump card, pun intended. So whatever side is holding on to it, depending on what step of the legislation it is, and it's people's lives sometimes that are hung over the fire. Like they're just a poker chip, and so I'm in favor
And
of simplifying for sure.
yeah, and once again, this is something that's not just Trump administration. It happened under Obama's administration. It happens over Bush administration, Clinton administration. This has happened as
Since
This
the
is like a
beginning of
Congress thing.
our two party system, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, which takes me to my last
Please
point.
take us home, baby. I know where this is
So
going.
it's a great segue where the issue is in a two-party system,
Right, right.
we are always choosing the lesser of two evils, right? I've never found a candidate at any level where I'm like, wow, this person represents me to the fullest. It's like 20%, 30%, maybe 50% max. But like, and the philosophies are so away from each other. Like, the voting Democrat, voting Republican are so different that it's like you're kind of just like I said, it's like what 40% are you more is more important to you, because technically you're really, I think most people are voting 40% of these things I like, 60% maybe like 30-40% I'm indifferent to, 20% I hate. Like it's just, you're forced. And I think this election coming up more than anything
A signature.
is,
Yeah,
you
it's a
know,
signature of this.
is kind of like it's come to the pinnacle. I mean, last election I think was pretty bad with Clinton and Trump, and now it's getting, I think even worse with Biden and Trump. It seems like it's the same type of person as far as like rich elite, like it's the same people that are coming up, and we don't have access to any other choices, that somebody that's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's like you either like all this and all that, and there's nobody like that. I mean, majority of the people aren't like that. So somehow involving more parties, or giving opportunity, like making it more accessible for people that are outside of the typical Republican Democrat cookie cutter, I guess,
Yeah, the
to give
prepackaged
us more,
pointers.
yeah, to give us more choices. And I think, I honestly think that some of the people that are running are only saying these things to get the money from those two parties, right? Because they're so big now as far as funding. To be able to get the Democratic funding from them, they have to be down this party line, otherwise they can't. So they're not even given the chance to be themselves necessarily. It's just you have to be this way to get our funding, type of thing.
Hmm.
So I really think that that needs to change.
I mean,
I mean, how do you feel about that?
I will say with regards to the support associated with any individual candidate, we hit valleys this feels like a valley, a low point for both parties. But whenever there's a quote unquote successful presidency, 8 years, 2 terms, just by virtue of the swing effect, like when Obama was running and when Trump was running the first time around, I would say the phenomenon of, a newcomer who, like, Obama felt like a gamble to a lot of people who are, still working under color coded, affiliations, and, just, yeah, again, the notion of person of color, but his credentials, I think, were very much suited for presidency. And on the other side, you have a Trump who, is a big business, almost a celebrity figure, but also brings about this kind of wild card factor, and that does get people excited. Whether it's it's logical, expectation of good policy, or it's just I like what the energy that this guy has. There is some moments of like unity that you'll see, like again with Obama's first election in 2008 and with Trump's in 2016, because like it's well documented that a Trump rally is like a sight to behold. Like it's a celebration, and I
Sure.
think Obama's first run very much the same. Um, Regardless of what the candidate was bringing to the table, the excitement and passion for politics does kind of come in those moments. But at the end of the day, neither Obama nor Trump uh, will be remembered for making the majority of Americans completely satisfied, and it's a very hard feat to accomplish for any president.
Well,
Um,
I'm not talking about from an emotional aspect because I think that's kind of what you're talking about. I'm talking about actual. So, say for example, right now, I'm a big two-way person because I think that guns are important and I like that, which is a tends to be more of a conservative Republican thing. Democrats are going to be against two-way, but then as far as like certain
Not
social
against, but just
issues,
some restrictions on 2A,
as far as just like
the type of
as far as
weapons.
views on two-way, right?
I mean, nobody's saying take your guns away, but just not
There
the
are people that are
automatic.
saying
I
that,
mean, not all
but
of us, not all of us.
yeah,
I think the
right. But
general
what I'm saying.
consensus is we want controlled, no massive firearms that you need for a freaking war. That kind of the rhetoric is the main.
And like I said, like I said, if I'm against that, right, is more of like, let's say the Republican Party stands represents more of how I feel about 2A than the Democrat Party. But let's say on an issue of maybe gay marriage, the Democrats represent more of how I fall on that than the
Right, you're left
Republicans.
between.
I have to choose between what's more
You're
important to
losing
me.
the game one way or the other. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of people are falling into that situation, whether it be like, okay, this guy's likable, that guy's likable. All that stuff is cool, but I'm talking about how I want my country to be governed. There's not that much choice. I have to kind of pick like what 40% I'm most excited about and kind of vote that way, even if it's not necessarily everything that I want, because the Democrats aren't going to give money to somebody who's super pro 2A and but is um good on gay marriage, right? They're gonna give somebody that's falls under 2A the way they want to fall under it, and gay marriage the way they want to fall. Likewise, the Republicans aren't going to give their money to a candidate that's 2A the way they want, but not, but the gay marriage is going to be what
Right,
they
right.
want,
There's deal
and that's
breakers
where
on
I
both
think.
sides. Yeah.
And those are just two examples. I'm saying down the line, there's so many situations where there is no cross, and that's where I think we need more options. Where it's there's candidates that are a little bit this, a little bit that, maybe socially Democrat, but fiscally, when it comes to economy, are more conservative. And I think those options we're not seeing that. It's just you're either all here or all there.
Right. The problems are very much rooted in the economics of politics, the way the money is stacked. Again, on each
Exactly.
side, the political, special interest groups, big business, and I think the solution will come. It's going to take money. It's going to take a lot of money to fund
Or
this.
getting out of or getting money out.
getting money out of these other parties, and but the startup, the grassroots aspect of it, whether it's an independent, we have Green Party, we have some independent parties right now, but the reason that they're failing is because, I mean, sometimes you'll have a millionaire, a billionaire, right, who will run, but uh, there needs to be a belief in the candidate and in the potential execution, and holding up to their end of the bargain. And yeah, the way it's set up right now, I agree. There needs to be a neutralizer. There needs to be something to reset, because we're so far along in in the system that we are no longer being served, uh, like you said, whether it's half of the issues we care about, or 40%, whatever the case is. It's uh, it's we're looking at a potential election where maybe everybody's gonna lose to an extent. Some part of
Yeah.
somewhere you're gonna feel like you got screwed. So
Yeah,
um,
you would never go to a restaurant like there's gonna so I use the example like say you go to a restaurant and you have to choose between only eating meat or only eating vegetables. There are gonna be vegetarians that are cool with that. There's gonna be people that hate vegetables that are cool with that. But a majority of the people are gonna be people that want a little bit of meat and a little bit of vegetables right now. And our politics system is you have to completely choose all meat or all vegetables, and I don't think it's as our country has gotten bigger and bigger, our population has gotten bigger and bigger. That gives a lot like a two-party system worked when it was a very small population and there was less issues that were necessarily as divisive.
right.
Now it's like there's so many people in this country that come from so many different backgrounds that have so many different thought processes, but it's still you got to conform to these two boxes, and I think we're getting to a point where
This next
that's
generation,
not true.
it definitely represents unorthodox thinking. The libertarians, uh,
Green Party,
sure,
the
and I think there's socialist Democrats
Socialist
who don't
Democrats,
like this slight left of center, or basically center skewed politics. So
right?
a Bernie Sanders would benefit in that realm. But yeah, man, there's definitely. I'd like to study more other countries who do have like multi parties, and see how
I
they.
know India does, but I think it started early on. That's why it was able to happen.
Mhm.
Um, but and then they have a lot
But
that are on
historically,
a.
do you think there's been uh, like a fair turnstile of different parties in being elected, or has it mostly
I
been
think
just two?
so.
Okay,
I think so. And
BJP is
then
in power right now, right?
right, yeah,
Yeah.
Modi is BJP, so he's in power right now. But yeah, I think that one of the ways it could be done is making it where limiting how much money you could actually use and making
Oh
it
yeah,
where like national debates and stuff are kind of more, I guess, like socialized, even though that word is kind of like where it gives everybody an option. Like there's not like maybe there's just like this small barrier that you have to hit, so it's not just but like giving more access to the Libertarian Party, to the Democratic Socialist Party, like where, okay, you guys have your own primary and you guys say, okay, Bernie's a guy and maybe the Libertarian Party has their person, even if it's just four parties, and then those four parties are represented on that national debate where it's not like where I think the last time there was three people in a national debate was when Ross Perot was there, and he was just significantly wealthy that he was able to compete with the Democrats and the Republicans, but
yeah. Money
it
should
it,
not be a factor when it comes to you
it
know
shouldn't limit,
yeah,
like it shouldn't
as
limit as
much
far
as it
as
is right
that.
now. I agree. I agree. Um, yeah, that would be a dream, man. I think we're definitely at that point where, uh, we've made this quote unquote. I don't call it a mistake, but it's like expecting different results by using the same means. It's insanity at this point. So I'm all for it. It's just how do we? I don't know how we would go about the initial steps, but
Everything starts with people making their voices heard.
right.
Like
Start a petition.
if people try to start, I think there's gonna be, in the future, the Democratic Socialists, the AOCs, Ileana Omar's, the Squad, and Bernie Sanders is probably coming to his the end of his
How
political
many
career.
runs he's got left? Yeah.
But
Andrew
that.
Yang, I'd like to see take another crack.
Mhm.
Mark Cuban, uh,
Well, I'm saying as far as like the Democratic Socialists seem like they're building enough of like a ground surge where maybe
because
they
there was
can
a lot
create
of
their
people
own
let
party.
down. There was a lot of people let
Hmm.
down with Joe Biden this year. Um,
And it kind of speaks to the fact that an opposing view like Bernie Sanders, basically by the Democratic Party, got kind of like just
Ousted
both times ousted
internally.
twice.
Yeah.
So it shows that he like, and even like I think Trump probably isn't truly a Republican, but that was the only way that he could, he had to espouse Republican values to be able to run for president because
I would bet
kind
he
of
and
think.
Mark Cuban have a lot more in common in terms of uh, mentality and what methods would be best for this country. But again, it's you know we're not there yet to be able to see these new potential candidates really have a legit shot. But
Yeah,
uh,
we just need more options, man. Like it
yeah,
can't be, we can't keep, like, how many elections are we gonna? Because I get this from like just over social media in general and through like my friends, and nobody's excited. Like, it's just like lesser of two evils, lesser of two, and we've kind of gotten to the point where it's
I
like
think
we're just accept that it's lesser of two evils type
I
of
mean, I
thing.
think Trump has still got his diehard fan base, man. I mean, he just from what it looks like,
But
he can do no wrong in a lot of people's eyes still.
well, but I think that's also based off of there are no other options. Like if you're a Republican, right, or if you espouse those Republican values, you will figure out a way to mentally get yourself
You'll fit
excited
into the
about the
box.
candidate,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same. It's like us being Laker fans, right? Even if the Lakers have maybe a crappy team, we're still gonna cheer for it. We're
Sure.
still gonna be love it and try to do it because that's our team kind of thing. So I think it's more comes from that versus I believe if we have more options, you will start seeing people kind of go different
I mean,
avenues.
and just my last observation on this, so the reason I compare Obama to Trump, obviously, again, Obama had the qualifications. Trump has the style points, the swagger, the draw of attention. But Obama too had the draw of attention, and that's the thing is, me as an Obama supporter, I was willing to disregard the the drone strikes in the Middle East, the countless deaths, um, and the way a Trump supporter would disregard aspects of the how he handled
His rhetoric, his
rhetoric, how he handled,
divisive
if you want to
rhetoric,
look at policy, how he handled certain aspects of coronavirus. There may be Trump supporters who got sick from coronavirus because they didn't take it seriously. They followed as much as Trump's direction, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the effect with these charismatic politicians is people are willing to completely disregard their needs and will just I guess it's kind of a Laker fan effect where he's my guy no matter what. He's the way it's not about what he's saying, it's the way he's saying it, right? And I think you touched on it too. And again, Obama had that quality, and I think Trump has that quality. There's a reason why when I listen to any candidate now, whether it's even former President Obama, I listened to him the other day, and there's something in his voice that's gone. Like I've listened to Trump so much that he's changed the rhythm and the
optics.
flow of how a speech is like there's a reason why every news network will catch on to what he says because he's delivering it in such an explosive his when his mouth opens you're going to expect something controversial, you're going to expect loud, you're going to expect brash, and
Right.
I felt like that has numbed me to these other politicians, aside from maybe a Bernie who I think does a great job, still shouting. But the status quo of how a politician articulates has been completely shot in the air, and
Sure.
it's going to be hard for us uh, to regardless of who wins this next election, it's going to be hard for us to come back to like the that politically correct politician, I think. So again, I'm curious as the next person.
Yeah. I
um
mean, I just think that, if we had more options, we wouldn't necessarily need to just fall in love with,
yeah, this game is
you know what I
not
mean? You kind of just have to, unless you want to just be miserable with your choice. I guess, which I think majority of is, and once again, we're only seeing, I'm seeing things from direct conversation. Anybody I really talk to, especially with this election, isn't like, I've not met anybody that's like super like yay about it. It's like it's really choosing from just like, what they feel like is gonna be worse. So this person's gonna be worse, so that's why I'm gonna choose the other person. Versus like, I'm really excited about the change that this person's gonna make and all these kinds of things. So I think that if we had more options, then it would be harder for it would anything when there's more choices, it's gonna spread out the support. You know
Sure,
what I mean?
I
Like,
agree.
so so I think that that's something that we need to be pushing for, and I think that's something that can help at least once again like change, give us more
Yeah,
representation
I mean, I
and make us more excited about the voting process.
in the argument that we talked about, state having state legislation versus having things that would be on the federal level on our ballots. It's the size of our country. It does get difficult to find consensus, on majority of issues, and so that would be another obstacle with more than two parties is just being overly split, and then you would, I guess, a majority would be anything that's more than the others.
I think maybe that would make it easier to go with the whole popular vote versus electoral college
Right.
if there was more options,
But
right?
imagine if
So,
there was a, like, let's say if there's three candidates running off, and the leading candidate takes in 40%, right? The
mhm,
other two candidates parties get 30% each. If there are people in those in supporters of those other parties, that's 60% of the country who may be potentially unhappy with
unhappy, right?
with a 40% quote unquote majority. So that's where I'm just foreseeing potential
But
flaws.
that might be the case right now, anyways.
Yeah, that's
You
very,
know what I mean?
because
Because
there's
we're
there's no guarantee that that third party is not going to have some of the values of group one and
exactly.
group two.
It
So yeah,
would. It's not going to be like
it'd be
completely
maybe a
again,
hybrid. Yeah, yeah.
because right now there might be 60% because maybe let's say it was almost 50-50, but let's just say it's 50-50 right now. But maybe 20% of the people that voted for Trump voted because they had to, because
Party
the
lines, so
most of
on
the
and so
things that,
forth.
yeah, well, most of the things they were excited about are conservative issues. That would be 70% that would probably pick another option if there was an option, right? So we're just because in a two-party system, we're assuming that it's only 50-50, but it could be more than that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's there's definitely some more nuance to it, but yo, man,
Yeah, man. But that was my list, so we
yeah,
got through
yeah, man.
it.
We definitely touched on some things that now the power really is in the people's hands to affect some change, and I'm more awoke and alert and tuned in than ever, man. I'm putting in the work to read, uh, you know, history, current event, whatever the case is. I'm alert. So, uh, yeah, man. I'm glad we get to have our take on this.
For sure. And you know, I guess that's pretty much it for this episode. I know we went a little bit
Hey,
longer,
man.
almost 2 hours,
Today we had
but
time.
yeah. So that's great, man. Well, let's stay safe, and we'll talk next time,
All right. Peace.
man. Peace.